Hey everybody, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. And it is Wednesday evening, the 18th. And I was able to do an earlier live stream. I appreciate anyone that was in that, talking a little bit about courtship and dating and all that kind of stuff when we were in Christianity and how it's changed and different. Good stuff. Good stuff. We were going yesterday over my earlier book, poetry, from when I was a Christian, although a lot of it's not really Christian in that sense, but some interesting poetry from yesteryear. I do really love the idea of trying to figure out ways to be more poetic, whether it's in actual poetry or just in our prose to be more poetic with it. But it's good stuff. But tonight I'm just gonna kind of meander through some thoughts. This isn't necessarily going to be organized and so forth. I was just thinking sometimes it's nice to just kind of think through, talk out loud what happened to us, and talk out loud what we've been through. Sometimes it's good to just talk it out, and that's all you can do is like when you talk it out, you find yourself saying things and trying to reflect on it. And I've talked before about stream of consciousness and how it's helped me. And I know it's helped some of you, but sometimes you just have to just open up the floodgates and just, not in any profound way, just kind of let it all just kind of slowly evolve. But, I think, and again, this is going to kind of be like, it's going to go where it's going to go. I think about the idea of different homes. A lot of homes, I think you could contrast and say they were built with very soft, gentle hands, but also at the same time with very hard doctrines. Some of us as children felt like we were wrapped up in so much warmth and kindness, and yet we were being trained in so much toxicity and trauma at the very same time. And we might remember some of our old days in Christianity with a little bit of fondness. You might say, I remember when the air smelled like laundry soap and dust and Sunday morning. And I remember the light coming through the windows with paleness and sort of a little hush of maybe that's somehow the light from an angel. And everything sort of feels, holy and spiritual. And you think back on the couch and the carpet and the family Bible, your parents' voice. I remember my dad clearing his throat and rattling his keys. He rattled his keys for some strange reason all the time. You could always hear him coming. You remember your parents and any adults really sort of speaking in the background with certainty. And you begin to think as a kid that the certainty that you're picking up on is just that's what grown-ups sound like. They're so certain of what they say. And they certainly love us. And I did feel loved. I think that's part of the ache. And that's why some of our stories take so long to tell. It would be easier and cleaner and maybe sharper to say it was just all bad. It was all iron and thunder. It was all terror. It was all, fangs and teeth. It was all wound and no shelter, no kindness. But that's not how it came across. That's not how we experienced it. That's not how it lived in us. That's not how it lived in you. We had yummy casseroles, and we had pats on the back and handshakes and hymns, some of which we grew to love. We folded our hands and we lowered our voices for prayer, and it was special. And there was the sort of the choreography of church days or getting ready with our Sunday best. And we remember the church, the pages of the Bible, the thin tissue paper, rice paper of the Bibles, turning it just became our home, became the special things. And you had smiles everywhere that were just emanating, this is your home, you belong here, this is us, we're the family of God, we're the church. And it just happened so many times for so long that we belonged. And it was like it was written on us. Became like the first commandment. You belong here. You belong with us. You're one of us. We're different from the world. They're separate. You're one of us. That was the first commandment. Be one of us. And a lot of us had no words and no ability to say, I did not know that I was being built and assembled. I thought I was just growing up. I was being built. And I think about how when you look at a piece of wood and it's exposed to the weather kind of slowly, quietly becomes part of that wood. It enters it, whether it's a dampness or mold or just being wet from being exposed to it. It enters the wood, and in a similar way, these worldview constructs that were around us just slowly entered our hearts. And we began to bend around everything that was taught to us. Our worlds in some ways felt so broken, and yet to us they felt so whole, so complete, because God was in it. God was above it, and love was there. Love was inside of our lives, at least the love of God in theory. And hell was separate. It was, it was below. It was out there somewhere. It was with the world and the bad people. And we were somewhere in the middle, trembling. We were small enough that we needed to be cherished, and many of us were. We were small enough that you need to be warned about hell. And it kind of felt like we wanted to know that the universe noticed us. And we were told, yeah, it does. And it has a name. It's God. And it became beautiful to us as children. We had, as children, hymns rising in crescendo on Sundays, and it felt so good. We were in sanctuaries where the pews were shiny and polished, and the heads were bowed. We heard stories of lions' dens and floods and blood on the doorposts, seas opening at the command of God, the cross lifted high. And to us, we were given the instruction that this explains everything. It was, in a sense, a complete world to us. It was a sealed world. It had an answer waiting for everything. Everything could fit into a sermon. Everything could fit into a prayer request. And all of our childlike thoughts and wonder, it got drenched in the blood and drenched in the baptismal water. And we had no real opportunity to think our own thoughts before that was our entire world. And again, in some ways we loved it. I loved the music. I really did. I loved the softness that came over people when they talked about grace. I loved the sense that in this crazy, chaotic world with so much insanity and noise, that there was a sense of purpose and order, even if it felt hidden. There was a hand on the wheel. There was a story that was larger than me and larger than the pain we were going through. I loved that there was a father and sort of an architecture that he had created that was holding all the pieces together, pushing the dark away and keeping the light inside. We as kids, we were not just believing what we were told. We were truly being transformed by it. It was like the air we were breathing, we were inhaling. It was the drink. It was everything to us. It was when you look around a room and think, this is my room, that the universe of Christianity became our room. It was everything. It was our facial expressions. It was our hearts. It was the prayer we prayed late at night when the lights were about to turn out, but there was a thunderstorm coming. We'd pray, and we knew that somehow we'd be safer. I think sometimes there's almost something unbearable in just how tender some of the beginnings were. I remember when I was a child, when I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't sleep for quite a bit of my life, but I couldn't sleep, and sometimes my mom would come in and she would do this thing where she would help me to get to sleep by way of, she'd like massage my forehead. It's like a 4-year-old, 5-year-old. She'd massage my forehead. But then when she'd get to my arms, my legs, she would like, give them a quick massage, and she'd say, I want you to let me control it, drop it. And she would hold it up and let it go and drop it on the bed. And she would see I was kind of holding it up. She'd, no, just let me control it. And she'd do it over and over until when she would release my arm, it would just flop down. Utterly surrendered. And she would do the same thing to my other arm, then to my leg. And by that point, I was theoretically more sleepy. There were some tender moments. And everyone around you, you just think, these people, my parents, my pastor, they kind of see with heaven's eyes. And I'm learning to see too. And nobody had any way of knowing that one day you will have to untangle this whole big knot. Nobody said you're going to have to someday discover that while you had love pounded into you, you also had fear pounded into you. And it was given to you so young that it'll be years upon years before you ever wake up, and you won't know what to do when it happens. Your body just picked it all up. And so I became, and you became, children inside of a story that was already in motion. I think a lot of us felt like it was ancient, and in that sense, it was exciting. It was part of something so big, so so old, way beyond our years. We're talking centuries and millennia, but it was the bizarreness of the blood magic was still amazing. Being soaked in the blood, this amazing story, and the triumph, the overwhelming triumph. This is going to be an amazing God story. He's going to win in the end. But your goodness matters. Your goodness matters, and you cannot doubt. And I think a lot of us would say it felt like the invisible world was pressing in on us all the time. Everything visible had like the fingerprints of God and angels and righteousness and holiness or sin. I mean, everything. The moon, your neighbor, your bad dream, that thunder I mentioned, the ache in your conscience, your food. Everything had something to do with eternity. Everything meant something. Everything was moving or leaning upward or downward. Nothing was just itself. It was nothing was merely itself. And I think in some ways, some of us remember those years with a bit of homesickness. We know it hurt us. We know it was toxic. But it's strange to be living in a life in a world where everything means so much and everything has meaning beyond meaning beyond meaning. And it felt, I guess, safe to know that nothing is random. It became like a drug, like a narcotic mercy, to know that somewhere everybody's tears, everybody's sorrows, everybody's aches and pains and dreams, they're going to be filled and resolved with something that's going to be eternally good. And everything that you have ached for, all the loneliness that you deal with, it's all already been anticipated and foreseen by God. And every break and every fracture of our lives will be fixed someday. And there is an invisible plan that's glowing with brilliance. And you can sleep a lot better in a world like that. And curl up and feel happy. Say, this is my good Father who loves me. This is my truth. This is my home. I don't even have all the words yet, but this is where I want to be. You didn't have any idea this was a system. You didn't have any idea you were being conditioned. You had no idea that this was about doctrines and that you were being enclosed and that the walls were closing in on you. You had no idea that a map had been effectively drawn for your life and you were going to follow it, whether you liked it or not. You just thought this is the best life ever. I remember so much wanting to be good. Do any of you feel like you understand that? I wanted to be so good. I wanted to be clean. I didn't even know what unclean meant in some ways. I just knew it was bad. But I remember listening a lot. I was a quiet kid sometimes, not always, but I was pretty shy for a while. I was quiet. I was listening, always listening. I was waiting for the warning, waiting for the tone. I was waiting for approval. I was waiting to see, how things are going to go in this place. And when someone was speaking, the word of God, and it felt like something holy is happening, we all know when to bow our heads. And, I learned to be reverent. I learned to be quiet. It was a lot of repetition, and we were being immersed. And it felt like we were standing surrounded by forces, in a sense, not like Star Wars, but by forces that were so much older and larger and more profound than anything else, certainly larger than us. And home was so structured and preordained and pre-interpreted in that sense. You know, mother, you have your father, you've got God, you've got the church, you've got everything. It's just the structure's there. And they all came together in my mind, and they blurred into one big shape of, this is your protection, your authority, this is your warmth, this is your warning again, this is your song, these are your rules, this is your life story, this is what embraces you and you embrace, this is how we correct you, this is your shelter, this is your light in the darkness, this is your judgment when you're wrong. This is everything. And it's all coming together, sort of like relatives in a family portrait. And, looking back, there was a sense of beauty at the time. Beauty is part of how the world makes us feel okay. And at the same time, sometimes what we perceive as beauty as kids can become a cage. And that cage is basically your inheritance. And that's why we will defend the thing that is causing us so much pain for so long. So many of us will keep defending it, even after it's clear this is hurting us. We don't see the wolf. We just see the wolf in sheep's clothing. We don't see its claws. We feel like we belong, and we hear the music, and we hear the trembling voices of the pastor and the choir. And they tell you every soul is precious beyond measure, and there's danger coming every hour of the day. So cling to Jesus with all your heart. I was so small. I did feel loved in many ways. I was listening a lot. I was learning how the world works. And I was learning how to quietly distrust myself, my own heart, and my own mind. And I did not know. I did not know how much was going to change. I did not know that almost nothing is going to tell you in advance that it's going to end. It just ends. I only knew I was in a house that had voices and scripture and Bible and prayer, and it felt like it was braided together and woven together with tenderness, and it felt like wisdom to me. And I only knew that there were arms around me and songs and coming in my ears, and a universe above me full of angels and God, and that somewhere in this story I was part of something major and wonderful and glorious. Of course I signed up. Of course I said yes. I did not have any idea what some of it meant. I really didn't as a kid. But that's how they get you. They want you to know the language before you know what the language means. They don't want you to know the definitions, and they don't want you to know all the doctrines. They just want you to feel the pressure with love. I remember focusing so much on the word sin, sin with all of its shadows, all of its darkness, missing the mark. And grace, of course, grace felt like a window where the light comes through. I remember the words, of course, like blood sort of arrived on our doorsteps of our childhood with a lot of amazement and splendor, but also feeling terrible, terrible for the lamb that had to die. it was at the same time horrifying and holy. And we were expected as children to receive it with gratitude and amazed but soft eyes. And salvation was a big word for me. Sort of felt like an ambulance siren that you would hear very far away, but coming closer, coming for you, because we knew something had gone wrong. And we didn't necessarily know what wrongness meant, but we knew we were wrong and we needed salvation. We knew obedience because it felt so nice to have our parents say, "You're well done. Good job, little Johnny." And it felt nice to feel clean. Holiness was sort of important, although certainly, expensive, and that it took your commitment. And we learned all this stuff. We learned all these things, all these words. In some ways, they didn't even have to sit down with us for some of it. It just took over our bodies and our minds through repetition, through ritual, through the music, through the rewards, through the warnings, through what we were taught to long for. I remember so much the old songs, longing for the other side of the banks of Jordan. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. And that fear of missing out from all those beautiful things, the fear of losing God's close love. And I think fear and love did come together for a lot of us. And that became a reality. Fear and love side by side. And the adults cheered, of course, because we're learning the curriculum, we're learning the catechism. They opened their arms. And they made us feel safe because we were doing the right thing according to them. And that's how we became fluent in Christianese. We watched and we saw which things we could say or do that brought calm and relief to the different situations. We figured out which things would get us in trouble and cause concern for the adults. We figured out which stories to repeat. We heard the language, in a sense, of heaven so young. And it sounded like such an old language. It sounded good and peaceful and settled, like the battle's already won. So many songs. Songs, of course, before sermons meant something to us. All those melodies carrying all these doctrines straight into our psyches. Your mind has the ability now, of course, to analyze. That's your gatekeeper. But the music went in before those gatekeepers were there, before the skeptical parts of your mind could do anything about it, or even be formed. Why should blood be beautiful? Should surrender really be a virtue? Should we really distrust ourselves so much? Are we really that bad and wicked? Do we really have to look at our own hearts all the time and question whether we're basically traitors to God? The songs didn't give us any capacity to think through it all. They were there very softly, very repetitive, easy enough for our little mouths, our little lungs, and whatever the music repeated, our nervous system repeated. And when it repeats it long enough, it feels like that's us, that's who we are. I sang songs about getting clean and being washed in the blood before I really knew what it meant. Songs about being lost and found, about being blind and being able to see. Songs about surrender, giving it all. I and you were taught to give up ourself before we really knew what self even was. And the songs were lovely. And the harmonies lifted your spirit and everyone came together. The room felt like a party. And it became something larger than life. And they turned their faces and their hearts upwards, and so did we. And it felt like heaven was coming close, like heaven was close enough to be right above the ceiling. And what do children do when they have authority around them, but also the preachment that this is so beautiful? You trust the beauty. And you trust that that beauty is going to keep you safe. And you trust that whatever is feeling solemn and critical and radiant also has to be true. And that's when the danger comes so fiercely. That very tender confusion, such tender, innocent hearts. We were taught we were so wicked, but we were innocent. And the danger that comes when a child discovers there's more to this. But as kids, we weren't ready for that at first. We just repeated it so much. It was all sacred to us. It kind of got into our own blood. And to me, at least, it felt very primal, very critical, very like as if it was part of something that had been passed down, and I needed to make sure I didn't break that chain. I remember so much listening to pastors, so many pastors at church, pastors on the radio, pastors on the radio at home, pastors on the radio in the car, all these voices from their pulpits, many of them pounding the pulpit, many of them extremely sure that they're sure that not just that the Bible's true, but their interpretation of the Bible is true and the only one that could be trusted. It's amazing how it works. They spoke of hearts and souls all the time. It's like God had already come. He made his judgment. He diagnosed everybody. He'd exposed everybody. And they spoke with so much confidence. And of course I listened. We're going to listen as children. We're going to catalog it all. We're going to notice what makes the adults happy, what makes them sad, what makes them cry, what makes them nod, what makes them upset, what makes them say, amen. You learned the words that they loved. Cross, mercy, wickedness, forgiveness, backsliding, redemption, conviction, calling. That became like the furniture in your house. And they weren't just words or ideas. I mean, they were you. And it felt like in that house, in the house of your brain, the house of your life, sin was always like right there as a big issue. Sin sat, as it were, in the corner, had its own little chair, and we all wanted to pretend at times it wasn't there, but we kind of also preached it so much that we knew it was there. Sin was sitting in the corner, waiting to get us. And at the same time, so was God's grace, of course. It was beautiful, but it was delicate. It felt like it was right there, but also that if we focused on sin, we could lose it so quickly. It was always available, like in theory, but it was often difficult to trust in practice. And obedience, of course, was the word of the day. Sort of standing there in the doorway like a father with his folded arms. You will obey, and I'm watching you. Holiness was like the good china. You bring out the holiness reverently, occasionally, carefully. You need to be pure. You need to handle it with care. Blood. Gosh, my dad used to love to talk about the blood of Christ, the fountain. There is a fount filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins. It was like in a house metaphor, it's like the red wallpaper. It just covers the rooms everywhere. There's just blood everywhere. And after, you get exposed to that for so long, you don't think of it as violent. You think of it as beautiful. It's the decoration of your house. Blood, wallpaper, everywhere. And you think of salvation being so critical to keep you safe, keep the catastrophe out, keep the storm away. And you thank God every day. Thank you, God, for the salvation. Thank you that life does not collapse onto me, that sin does not steal me away in the night. And those words were what effectively furnished our lives and our feelings too. And we didn't just think through these things, we felt through them. And we feared through them, and we loved through them, and we ached through them, and we celebrated through them. And we interpreted ourselves and everything else through them. And we had no words yet to figure out what we really even meant. We learned so many things, like we learned guilt far before we ever learned to do critical thinking. We learned like that inner flinch, so like, oh my gosh, what have I done? The sensation of guilt, like that little flicker of heat and that impulse. It's like a hush that falls inside of your brain that says, what are you doing? Don't you know you've disappointed the God of the universe? He's invisible and he's absolute, but he's real and he's your father, and you just offended him. There was no need for it to be like a formal case for original sin. We just knew every time you got disciplined, every time you got told you didn't obey quick enough, you talked back, it became utterly proven, yeah, I was born with this sin nature. I did eventually read my dad's systematic theology books, but I didn't need systematic theology to become self-conscious about this and self-suspicious. I knew, and I mean, I had these steady suggestions, of course, from my parents and from the Sunday school, the preacher, but I knew my heart was deceitful. I knew that my desires were in some way going to get me in trouble. They were going to be dangerous if I didn't watch it. Sin was prowling at the door. I knew goodness was there, but it was only from God. Really, it wasn't from me. It was sort of upstream somewhere. It was available and it was within range. But I knew I was sort of in this bizarre mixture constantly of, you are deeply loved and you are also deeply under threat. And I think a lot of us, myself included, we would really deeply, aggressively, I think, we would focus so much on scanning ourselves, checking ourselves, looking for presumptuous sins, noticing things about ourselves. Like, it just felt like there was a million little stabs of our conscience. And we really did learn to become our own police. And I felt guilty all the time. I felt guilty, but it felt also like, right, like if you're being accused, then that also mean you're being guided. The Spirit is taking your heart and making you conscious of how much He wants to take your sin away and make you holy. And those kinds of seeds planted confusion that lasted for 40 plus years of my life. I mean, what is guilt to a child? That's just your normal, natural life. You don't say as a kid, somebody's trained me to feel like I'm bad. You just say, I want to be good. I just want to be good. It's not like you can in any way say I'm being calibrated and adjusted and forced and construed and pushed and molded. You just say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Even if you don't really know what you did, you can't find the crime. You just like, trust me, you're a bad kid. And that was the genius of it all, if I can use that word. They had so many ways to hurt us. And this system, truly, it explained the wound. It also sold us the bandage. And we were sure that we were in need of overwhelming redemption. You know, the story starts, you're fallen, you're very fallen. And then there's the ache. I guess I must be fallen. And I guess I am bad. I do see evidence of it. And then there's the rescue. I'm grateful. God, thank you for saving me. And then comes the lifelong confusion where you have endless trouble distinguishing love from the relief of having terror removed or postponed. I don't want to flatten out and remove and ignore the beauty of some of it, because again, there was beauty there. I mean, I think of children singing at Christmas time. I think of candlelight services. I think of wearing an angel costume. I was a cute angel. I think of the old hymns, trembling in the sanctuary. On Sunday nights at my church, one of my churches when I was a kid, we used to have a time when you could, instead of them telling you which hymns we're going to sing, they would let you pick off cuff, just raise your hand, and if the pastor picked you or where the song leader picked you, then you just say which song number, and the lady at the organ would switch to that number and she'd start playing. My hymn that I picked for years and years and years was Standing on the Promises. Goes standing on the promises of Christ my King. Through the eternal ages let his praises ring. Glory in the highest I will shout and sing. Standing on the promises of God. It goes on and on. I haven't sung that song in 40 years and I still remember it. It gets in your head. And that was beauty to me. Bible stories, deserts and giants and midnight prisons and women weeping at the tombs, the shepherd kings staring into the sky, the altar calls, knowing that God is redeeming his people. All these invitations where you learn to quiver and shake and fall at the knees of the pastor and of God. You get this sense that if you don't commit, it might just wreck your life. But if you will commit, it will split your life, in two parts. The one part was the old life, the new parts, the other part's the new life, and it will make you clean. How could that not move you as a kid? How could that not root itself in you? Everything was so heightened. It wasn't just like chance and breathing and matter. Everything had a second meaning. Everything had a spiritual contour. It was like this hidden electricity and voltage, like the language of heaven that was woven into our daily lives, that was turning this visible world where you live and see people and do things into like this stage crowded with eternity and the great crowd of witnesses. And you felt like you belonged. And you wanted to learn the words because that was like learning the map that the grown-ups knew how to read, and you wanted to learn how to read it because if you can learn the words and you can learn the map, which means you can know where you're going and you can speak it correctly and you can prove that you understand what matters most and you can respond at the right moments. You can know when to bow your head, to close your eyes. You know when to feel broken, when to feel grateful. You know when to say amen. You know when to say hallelujah. That was becoming part of the tribe. Excuse me a second. I'm going to stand up here. I've been sitting for a while. Yeah, for anyone that's just joining us, I'm just kind of meandering through some thoughts. This is more stream of consciousness, just thinking through where I've been. Sometimes it's nice to be more hitting the nail on the head, but sometimes it's nice to just kind of walk through it real slowly. I think for kids, once your language about theology and doctrine reaches a certain depth, it definitely moves from sort of feeling like it's the vocabulary that you have to learn to eventually it feels like it overtakes you and becomes sort of like the gravity of your life. And you're so small, but it's this big gravity field. It just pulls at you. But you feel like you get this beautiful taste where like, this is what maturity looks like. This is what growing close to God looks like. And if you can learn the words and you can learn to narrate yourself in a sense with all these sacred terms that you have amazingly been privileged to inherit, thank the Lord that I was born in the right country and the right religion and the right denomination, all the above. You just feel so grateful. And you learned to bow your knee. You learned to be submissive because you want to be approved. And you don't know as a kid how much of you is being transformed into this construct, this machine. To me, the language of heaven and of God was beautiful. Stained glass was beautiful. The light passing through those images, it colored everything. No pun intended. It made the world glow, but it also made all the decisions for us. We became fluent in a reality that was never there. We became fluent in the language of a people, of angels and demons that never existed and could never speak it because they never did. We learned to say grace. We learned to be obedient. We learned all about purity. We learned how to be convicted. We learned how to be broken. And that's how the shaping of a person works. That's how the deep shaping of a human works. That's what we went through. But that to us, that's how the world worked. It's like learning words when you're a kid. That's an elephant. That's a tiger. That's a donkey. That's a giraffe. You learn the words and everything makes sense now. We were learning the great hidden structure behind ordinary life. And eventually you'd get an extra glimpse, even on an emotional level, where it took a deeper, where you'd learn, why is that person crying during prayer or doing a song? Why is the preacher pausing with tears in their eyes and this being choked up? Why are these adults speaking so much of salvation and redemption? It makes you think of like a person that's out on a shipwrecked boat talking about how much they long to go to shore. We need to be saved. We need to be rescued. We need to get to safety. We learned that felt kind of amazing. It felt like we were speaking the language fluently a little bit, and we were belonging more and more and more. And the language began to feel less like it's their language and less external, and it became part of our pulse. It really did. And that's the sorrow and the tenderness and the reason that I go through these things in my mind sometimes so thoroughly and so slowly. It wasn't just words around me as a kid; they were in me. It's like my wiring and my reflexes as a kid. It was my aches and the gentle hushes, the gratitude, the skills. It was in everything. And when a child gets to that language, where it's that level where this language of theology shapes their reality, leaving that world later on does not feel like an option. It doesn't. And it doesn't feel like you're just changing your belief or your opinion about stuff. It feels like you're losing yourself. It feels like you're losing the oxygen you used to breathe. It feels like you're standing, in the ruins of a house. I remember again wanting so much to be good. I wanted to bring my invisible king the crowns, and I wanted him to look at me and say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." I wasn't trying to be like respectable in the well-behaved, social sense, the polished way. Smile for the camera, smile for the adults in the room. I mean, like, I wanted to be deeply, profoundly, thoroughly, truly good, all the way down in the hidden chambers of my mind, where even my thoughts lived. That was my longing. That was probably some of your longings. There was that ache, I want God to be pleased with me. I want heaven. And if heaven's watching me, and it probably is, I don't want them to find something bad or crooked in my heart. I want to be one of those people who seem to be easy for the grown-ups to talk about with bright, happy words. This kid is tender, this kid's obedient, this kid's pure, this kid's faithful, this kid is the kind of child that honors God. And there was innocence, for sure in that. Real innocence. I mean, it's a sweetness that's almost too painful for us to revisit. A lot of us never plotted to deceive anybody. A lot of us were not trying to change in any way what we were being taught. We weren't gaming the system. We were just children reaching upwards, as it were, with our hands with both hands open. Excuse me, both hands open. It's the best we could do at that point. And we were just saying, I'm just trying my best. But as we got the praise, we got devoted. We got devoted. Our devotion to it all arrived so early. We listened, we prayed, we felt, and we wanted our love for God to be visible to the world, but also to God himself. It's a strange thing now. At this point, you're like, that's so weird. But that's the kind of thing that Christianity plants in children. To be seen by the Maker, to be seen by the one who sees all things, to be loved by the one who invented love, to be loved by the definition of love, and to prove your sincerity to the person who already knows in advance whether you're sincere or not, and to offer your heart again and again, because you're taught that your heart is such a slippery slope away from God. It's treacherous, it's unreliable, it's always drifting. And any moment of spiritual weakness is going to lead you to failure. And so we kept watch. At least we learned to eventually as we grew up. And I think that's one of the hardest parts for me, is that we really did become the guardians of ourselves. We kept watch over ourselves. We were children, but we were guards. We were beloved and we were suspect. We were lambs and we were the fence around the lambs. We were worshipers, and we were these little internally defective demons. Every passing thought, we're just looking for the fingerprints of, did I do it right or did I mess up yet again? Was that selfish? Was that pride? Was it lust? Was it rebellion? Was it doubt? Was it worldliness? Was I doing this with pure motives? Did I pray enough? Did I mean it? Did I confess everything? Do I have hidden sins? Do I have presumptuous sins? What did I miss? Is there like a hidden stain still on me that God can see, but I can't? And that's how your innocence and my innocence got recruited. That's how it got recruited. That's how your tender conscience, was arguably so soft and gentle and sweet as a young person, that's how your innocence that should have been protected and could have been protected, sort of like a little puppy dog in your hands, it gets turned into a round-the-clock instrument for constant spiritual inspection. And that's what we thought of as maturity. Sensitivity to sin, having a soft heart to the Lord, being responsive to his conviction. And all these words made their wounds sound so good and so important and so noble. And it gave us like a little halo to this exhausting work of never really being able to rest inside yourself, because you're so bad that it's just going to end up poorly. So many of us, despite our desire for holiness and to be good, never felt clean enough, never felt even close to being clean enough. It just felt like we were dirty all the time, even after prayers and tears and confession and our rituals. It's like we were the washing machine, the spiritual washing machine of our own lives. And the warm waves of the water came and washed us clean, and then hours later, we're dirty again. I asked so many times, am I sincere enough? Did I repent? Did I really repent, or was I making that up? Because if you really repent, you shouldn't do it again, at least not soon. Are you really surrendered? Or is this just like a cultural Christianity? It's what your parents told you to do. And forgiveness, was I forgiven in the full sense? Or was this just my imagination that I imagine I'm forgiven? But in that back and forth, you kind of secretly brace yourself for punishment all the time. You think this might be real. I might be good, but then again, I might not be good. I might be in a bad spot here. And that ache, it was so quiet, but it was so persistent. Like, I don't know what to compare it to. But maybe it's like when you're cold and you're shivering and you don't notice it at first, and suddenly like, oh my gosh, I'm really cold. I'm literally shivering. My teeth are chattering. And you see it, and you try again and again, and that's the pattern. You try again, do it harder, pray more earnestly, feel more deeply, whatever. Monitor yourself more closely. Offer more of yourself. Be completely on the altar. If I could just be more pure in my motives, if I could just be more clean in my heart, if I could just be more steady, maybe God will be pleased with me enough. Maybe eventually I'll get to a point of maturity where his pleasure with me will be without reservation. Maybe there won't be like a, well, I love you, but footnote. So many of us felt like our visible obedience was masking an invisible disobedience, and that we were still displeasing God. And what does a child do in that context? When there's a standard that is basically, reaching into this invisible spiritual God realm, you perform. You perform like your life and like your soul depends on it, because in that context it does. Of course you're going to perform. What else can you do? Your goodness is measured by your heart, and your heart is supposed to be supposedly desperately flawed. And there's this all-seeing judge who's never blinking. He sees everything, and your performance becomes critical, and your serious spiritual performance becomes inevitable. You don't mean to be fake. You're cornered. You as a child were cornered. I as a child was cornered into trying to manifest true purity outwardly through every available sign to prove that we're pure on the inside. That's the posture of what it means to be good. It's a posture of goodness, the face of goodness and the tone of goodness. Your words, you make them tender and humble. You learn how to time your apologies right. You learn how to be confessing pretty promptly, because you want to appear spiritually serious. And you learn to look like this stuff moves you. Yeah, I'm feeling it. I can really feel how important this is. What did this verse mean to you? Oh, it meant so much to me. Let me tell you what it meant to me. You learn how to sound like you're really repenting. You learn how to get this there's like this approved version of yourself that you construct, and you learn how to do it, and to do it sincerely, at least a facade of sincerity. And you just think, this is going to relieve all the pressure. This is going to fix my life story. And that's part of the tragedy of this. It doesn't, again, always mean deception. It doesn't mean we were always pretending. But I think for a lot of us, it meant we were desperate. We're trying to build a bridge to love. We're trying as children to build a bridge to love and safety. And the materials that were handed to build the bridge of love are basically guilt. You're guilty, and we need to fix it. And if we can fix it, you're going to build a bridge to love. And so we perform, because we genuinely wanted that bridge. And that's the knot. That's the incredibly whatever, the knot you can't untie. And this was heartbreaking. You and I were acting out of holiness, trying with all of our might to become zealous, and the very system that we were stuck in, it made us self-conscious in a way that we really had nothing to do with our real life. And so we monitor ourselves. We monitor our thoughts, because we've been taught, thoughts matter. There's a morality behind all this. And if you flicker at all, it's going to be weighed in heaven. A little resentment, a little forbidden curiosity, a little selfish wish, a little flash of anger, a little fleshliness, sort of your body waking up to its own hungers. Nothing is just, that's just a passing, fleeting thought. Everything could become evidence in the court of God. What does that do to a child's internal life? Imagine yourself, and I imagine myself, our little minds, and privacy doesn't really exist. It's porous. It has holes. Everything is visible to God. Every silence is overheard, including the thoughts in your head. Your internal world is not a happy place. Again, it's a courtroom. and your desires are a potential accusation at all times. We saw so much of ourselves in the dark, in the dark. We were like frightened villagers. Like frightened villagers that were looking out into the forest. And we just thought it's full of bad creatures that are going to carry us off into the night, carry our souls off somewhere bad. And we loved God, at least we thought we did. We loved the idea of being loved by God. We loved the idea of the safety and the adults, and all those rivers ran together, because of course they did. And, love entered us. The love of God entered us through all these means. And again, it's not till so much later you discover that you were part of a machine. We wanted so much to please, to watch ourselves, to feel sorry quickly, to mistrust ourselves, to confess frequently. And so we became vigilant. We became tense. And, love was like, a hand on the doorknob, checking once more. Did we really lock it? Lock the door? My grandfather used to do that. He used to go around to the doors, and he would go around to all the doors. Like if they're going out to the store or something, he would go around to the doors that needed to be locked, and the windows that needed the latch. He would go around and check them. And because he was so afraid that he'd miss something, he would always do it twice, sometimes 3 times. I don't think he was OCD. He grew up in the Depression, and he learned you just have to check things over and over and over, because you just can't. There's too much at stake. And it was so serious, so reverent, so deep. When you as a child are willing to show that you're trembling over sin, you get so praised for your sensitivity. If you're worried about your motives, I hope my motives are honoring to God. You get praised for your spiritual awareness. You confess every scratch and scuff, and you're admired for your tenderness. And nobody's pausing for a second. No one's pausing long enough to ask, maybe they've been groomed. Confession, honestly, is one of the weirdest intimacies of this all. You spill out these inward things. You try to find the wrongness in you. You speak against yourself in every which way. Let me confess this. I'm bad this way. I'm bad that way. It's like you're rehearsing your insufficiency. And that's my ritual. If I rehearse how bad I am, everything will be okay. And we did it so much that it felt like healing. That's to me, that's again, so much of this is part of the sorrow. The tears were real. The relief was real. That feeling like you were being loosened from a bad thing after you've prayed, it felt so warm and tender. But feeling that relief doesn't prove it was true. It just proves that the anxiety had been briefly, soothed by the familiar sequence of your events that you do of, accusation and admission and absolution. The cycle works just well enough to keep you coming back. It works well enough, but you need to come back for more. And every time you return, you need to have a little bit more of you given, and a little bit more of you learns that this closeness to God is going to require a little bit more and more of you to be seen as bad or to disappear. And it's not dramatic. There's very little is that obvious in Christianity. It happens so gradually. Day after day, these little small preferences for approved thoughts over unapproved ones, the approved feelings that that God wants you to have over unapproved ones, approved desires. And when you repeat these practices of distrusting yourself, that's your quiet training. I grew up in a wood shop, and I did a lot of work with sandpaper, and you learn to sand down anything that stands out as not from God. If you're too anything, and you become careful with yourself, because you know that in a sense you're dangerous, and there's a loneliness in all that. And I still feel it when I revisit some of these thoughts, when I really dig deep into the reality of what I've been through and what you've been through. There's a loneliness of being with yourself constantly, but knowing you're not really on your own side. You're treating your mind as something you have to supervise, even now. I do wonder if some people do that. Everything feels like the gaze of God is there. And that's why you keep trying. Because you as a child are at the center of the stage, trying beautifully, but tragically, trying to become acceptable, trying to be the kind of child who does not disappoint heaven. It's endless. That's the tragedy. The standard was impossible. The child was frightened, but something innocent in you and me kept rising to that impossible standard. You can't meet the standard. You're a sinner. Okay, well, what do I have to do? If you go through the motions, you confess your sins, you claim the blood of Christ, you go to the cross again and again with a genuine hope. There's almost nothing sadder to us, I think, than the sight of a child standing on tiptoes before the throne of God, before the throne of goodness, throwing out the little bundle of effort, the little 4-year-old bundle of effort. Please, God, accept me. Please, I confess my sins. I accept Jesus as my Lord. Here's my little polished offering. Here's my little broken but mended basket full of prayers and tears. God, will it be enough this time? Are you able to smile at me without any reservations, or is there still an issue? I know it's technically covered by the cross. Jesus did it all. But I have an aftertaste in my mouth that somehow I'm still bad. You just want to go back into those scenes and gather yourself up in your arms and tell yourself, nobody's heart can bloom under the threat of constant inspection and judgment and terror. And the goodness that grows supposedly from that kind of terror will always have a flavor of terror. You were never meant to just manage your soul. The first task of a child should not be purification of some morality. The first task of a child should be just to be held, to be known, to feel safe and safe enough to grow your own roots, and to not be told the roots you're trying to grow are already diseased. But we didn't know that, so we tried harder. We were trying to be more devoted. We are still the child, still wanting to be good, still wanting approval, wanting it so badly. So many cracks. I have so much I want to say, but I think I'm going to stop in a minute. This was just, again, a few notes, but mostly stream of consciousness, thinking through where this all began. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with looking at yourself as a child and saying, my life was stolen from me? How do you deal with knowing that you have had so many things in your heart that you absolutely could have done differently, could have experienced differently, and yet it happened from such a young age that at this point you have to truly pull the roots out, and maybe you can't even see them. I think for a lot of us, the pain of this is realizing that we do only have one life. We're so pre-programmed to think about restarting, Oh, I died in the video game, restart, respawn, whatever the word is. Start in the game again. It's over. It's okay. You get a second chance. Things don't work out in life. It's okay. You get a second chance. And yet, when you realize that you don't get a second chance to go back to your childhood, that's part of the pain, is realizing I can't fix this. There is no grand restart. And I think part of the healing process is just coming to peace with that, whether it happens through a long time where you just sit and wait for a while, or maybe it comes through therapy or it comes through some other means, but at some point, you have to face it head on. I need to fix this and go back in time, and I can't. And that's perhaps to me one of the things that hurts the most. I want to redeem my life. I want to start over. I want a reset button, and nobody gets one. Christians think they get one, but nobody gets one. Hard stuff. I'll do some stream of consciousness again. I'll do some poetry here or there, but I'm working on a project that's, I think, going to be good. I've talked about it a few times in this series about, talking through the idea of anthropomorphizing worldview and worldview coming on the screen to talk to you, and in that sense to me as well. Your worldview is calling. Your childhood is calling. I'd love to hear from you all how you do it. I have a few ideas, but I'm ready to be the student as well. Teach me how to go back and change my worldview. Thank you all for being part of my life. I'm going to wrap this up here in a minute, but I have so few words and I have so many words at the same time. I think a lot of this for me too is life is so much at a crossroads in the last year, in the last month. So many crossroads, so many diverging points. And when you get to that point, you have to just say to yourself, where do we go from here? I mentioned it, I think, in the first episode we did, or maybe the second or something, but in that movie, Castaway with Tom Hanks, at the very, very end, he's out there in Kansas or somewhere really flat, and he's, 30 seconds left of the movie, and he just gets to a stop sign, a four-way stop sign in the middle of nowhere, and you look every which way you look, it's all looks like the same. It's just wheat fields that look the same in every direction or something like that. Where do you go? Where do you go when you're truly starting over? You've been stuck on the island for so long, and you finally got back home. But where do you start? It's a tough journey. I know a lot of you are going through it too. You reach out to me, you send me the emails, I see it. I see so much pain. And I know some of you need therapists. I'm not a therapist, obviously, but we certainly do talk about things that I hope are therapeutic. Some of us need to be better poets. Some of us just need to cry. We don't even need words. We just need to cry. It just hurts so much. I wish I were more profound. I wish I had words that could heal. Sometimes I occasionally think I've got a little slice of that, but most of the time I feel very incompetent to heal myself or anyone else for that matter. And that hurts because I do try hard. And I get a little bit of feedback from people that, yes, this is helpful, but I know my own heart. I know that the more that I talk about healing, the more that healing seems to evade me. The more I talk about deconversion and deconstructing and reconstructing ourselves, the more I feel like I've just barely scratched the surface and I'm just beginning. And that's an exciting adventure for me. I'm so glad to be on this journey. But yeah, as Phil said, it hits hard. It hits hard. I turned 50 this year in September. And it hits hard, And you also want so much to say, even if I can't fix it for myself, I want to do such a better job for my kids. I want to give them so much and shield them from so much. And for so many of us, that is also very much an uphill battle. I hope it's okay with you all that I've at times sort of let my sadness come through. It's not in any way to try to be misery guts. I remember somebody said a long time ago, a quote that I think is appropriate. They said, everyone gets to the bottom of the barrel sometimes, but when you get there, you don't have to lick the splinters on purpose. And I think that's a good way to put it. I'm hurting right now. I'm hurting a lot. I know some of you are too. Maybe it helps a little bit to hurt together. I don't know. I love you all. I hope we feel like we're on the same team. I hope we feel like we're on our own sides, on the same side. I hope we feel like we build each other up. I hope we feel like there's hope in the darkness. For whatever it's worth, I hope your tears tonight, literal or metaphorical, I hope your tears don't hurt as much as they always do. I hope somehow it feels just a little bit more happy. I hope that for you and for me. A few quick comments. That song's a blast from the past. Yeah, Standing on the Promises. Hey, Tim, I've been listening. I'm working on a project at the same time. Thank you, Phil. Thank you for being part of this. Sorry this was less structured than normal. I felt like I just wanted to kind of come on and talk off the top of my heart. So the next one will probably be more structured. Yeah, the fact that you can't go back and redo it hits hard. Yeah, it really is haunting. It's very haunting. That's a good way to put it. Hey, Cold Iron, great to see you. Well, thank you all so much. I will wrap up here in a second. I'll just say thank you again for being a part of my life, part of my community. And again, for anyone that's able to or considering supporting me, all the links are beneath this video. I've got some really cool stuff coming. I've got some really cool interviews I just lined up today. I'm excited about them. Really cool people. And there's some really cool people that have a lot to teach us. And I look forward to hearing their stories and to hopefully, along with you, gleaning some wisdom and just feeling less alone in this journey. But thank you all so much. I'll let you go. Have a great night.